Hi everyone. I'm going to show you how to do detailed architectural sections, both in Rhino and in Illustrator. So these are going to be two methods. One method is just strictly in Rhino. Another method is where you use Rhino and then you take it into Illustrator. I'm also going to show you how to do detailed wall sections, I mean like wall section details up close, like 3-inch details, and how to color your sections, but also just the principles of wall sections, what's important to show in a wall section. Populating your sections is very important as well. And so I would say this video is geared towards students and professionals, students who want to really push their section drawing style, and people who really want to have a new representational style in like architectural competitions, for example. And the level of detail for these sections are very sufficient for at the very least like DD level, if not the beginnings of construction document level, but you could still show it at a conceptual level, you could still show it at a competition level, or even just at an academic level. And this really is a synthesis between a detailed architectural pursuit with something that's more lively with entourage and vegetation and even color. And these are things, again, that you can do both academically and professionally. So let's just go ahead and get started. So the one main difference between a plan and a section is that a plan is really showing organization and movement through space as a whole, whereas section is really showing you a specific moment in experience of an architectural space. Okay? And so whether you're doing a plan or a section or axonometric from a 3D model, you don't want to over model or under model. You just want to put in the amount of detail where you're actually going to be cutting your plan or your section or your axon. And then you can fix a lot of things up quite quickly, actually, in the drawing space or the 2D space. And you only want to model what you will see. When you work with sections, I would say they're more forgiving than plans because you're only seeing a very specific moment of the architectural space, whereas a plan, you're seeing a lot of other architectural elements at the same time. So the first thing that we're going to do here is that we're going to make a clipping plane. And so when we make a clipping plane, right, I'm going to type in clipping plane and I'm going to select the vertical option. Okay. And then I'm just going to click wherever I want to make my cut, right? I already have them set up. I just want to show you, right? And I'll go up and I'll make my cut. And there's my clipping plane, right? So I'm only going to model things that I want to see in here, and everything else I'll take care of in the 2D space. All right. So I already set up a bunch of clipping planes and I saved the views. So I'm going to go to my clipping plane here and I'm going to click on it, right? And I'll go to the properties up here and I want to activate it on the left and front view just to make sure I know where it's being cut. So again, I'm doing a 2D, right? I'm doing a 2D drawing. So this is what I want. And then I can actually save this view right here. If I type in named view, I can call like FS for front section or like FS1, right? For front section. And then you can save it. I already have all my views saved and I'll show you how I'll toggle through my views. So let me just go ahead and just delete this. And I just want to show you how because I have my clipping plane saved. See, I have two little tiny clipping planes right here. So I have my views saved. For example, if I type in these views like SS1, you see how it goes straight to that view, SS2, you see? So you can save these views. You just have to type in your view and it'll activate that clipping plane in that view. So I'm going to go ahead and just type in SS1 and I'll just make 2D. I'm going to make 2D for all of these, but I'm just going to go to make 2D of this and then it's going to show up on my top view. Okay. So I'm going to select this, right, and do make 2D. And it's important that I get the current view, right? And I want to maintain source layers and I want the tangent edges and clipping plane intersections for sure, very important. Viewport rectangle is optional, group output is optional. Sometimes this can be actually a little troublesome, so that's really optional. And then after that, you just click OK. And again, it's going to show up in your top view. So here it is in the top view. And let me just go to perspective view just so you can see what's going on 3-dimensionally. So again, this is my clipping plane right here, right? I'm going to just activate this one again, go to my properties, just activate in perspective view. Okay. So you see, this is really what I'm cutting through, right? And you see, again, I'm only gonna, like when it comes to the framing for the windows or for the walls, you just wanna make it detailed with where you see it. I'm not gonna make it detailed everywhere. And since this is symmetrical, you can just, if you have like a symmetrical design or where you're cutting it is symmetrical or almost symmetrical, just do half of it and then just mirror the rest. You need to model very efficiently to save a lot of time, right? So don't go ahead and like model things individually. Model things as like a module and then just mirror things or turn things into blocks. So that's another important thing to understand. So this is where this is cutting. And again, this is going to be a 2D section, so there's a lot of things that we can get away with, right, and fix. So once you have that set, right, you're going to go ahead and make 2D for all of your clip and plane intersections. And then from there, we're going to go on to the next step, which is setting it up on a sheet. So the first thing that you want to determine before anything, before doing your line weights or your hatches or dimensioning or fixing your drawing, is you need to determine how big is your drawing. So that's going to help you understand your line weight thicknesses then. So you don't want to start doing line weights and you realize that your drawing needs to be bigger or smaller. So a good way to understand this is like what scale do you want to show your drawing at, and on what sheet size do you want to show your drawing. And let's say, for example, this is on a 24 by 36. So I'll draw a rectangle, right? I'll just do the center option and I'll do 24, or I guess 2 by 3, right? This is portrait. I'll just rotate it 90. And I want to do a scale factor, right? So if I do, for example, a quarter scale, the scale factor is 48. If I do a half scale, the scale factor is 24. If it's an eighth scale factor is 96. You're just going to divide 12, which is 12 inches equals a foot, by the denominator or the fractional value of the scale. So like half inch, 12 divided by 0.5, right? Quarter scale, 12 divided by 0.25, and that's how you get your scale factor. So I'm going to do this drawing this sheet at a half inch scale, right? So I'm going to scale this up by a factor of 24. So if I type in scale, I'm going to just click anywhere, and then I'll ask you for your scale factor. I'll do 24, for example. Let me just zoom out. So this is my sheet at a scale factor of half inch. So this is how my section is going to fit on a sheet at half inch scale. So maybe you have multiple sections, or maybe you have like a section in a plan, or like a section in a detail. So it's really good and it's very helpful, and I think necessary to really understand the scale of your drawing with respect to the sheet. Okay, and so I'm just using this as a reference. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new layout. So if you just click on this plus sign for a new layout, right, you can pick, the size. So I did 24 by 36. I'm doing landscape, and there's no detail. I'll just do a blank sheet, right? And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a detail, right? And so I'm going to go from this corner to this corner right here. Okay. So it's going to capture a lot of things. So I'm going to double click on here, and I'm just going to zoom into the relative area. So here I am. And remember, this is the original 24 by 36. This is also a 24 by 36. So I'm going to align them together. So I'm going to double click out of here, right? And I'm going to click on here, which is the layout viewport detail. And if I go to properties, I'm going to change the scale of this, right? So inches on a page to feet. So I'm going to say a half inch, just 1/2 equals 1 foot. You can press enter, it'll automatically do it as well. There you go. So right now, this is at a half inch equals a foot, okay? But I want to line up this viewport detail with the outline I made. So if I double click inside, I don't want to zoom in or out. I just want to pan, right? And this corner, I just want to move this detail to this corner here. So I'm going to click here, and I can grab this control point and it'll move the whole detail right there, right? So then let me just double click out of here, select this, I type in move, right? It's going to move everything with it to this corner here. Great. And then I can just grab this corner here and move it here. There you go. So now this is perfectly lined up with that reference rectangle we made in the model space. And what you can do to make sure you don't shift things is if you click on your detail layout, you can actually lock it, right? So that means that nothing's going to shift or pan anymore. You won't have to worry about zooming in or zooming out. So that's very helpful. Now, once you have that set up, now you can start working on your line weights. That's the next thing that I would do, is I would start working on your line weights. I wouldn't even worry about cleaning up your model yet. You just want to get your line weights, get a good feel of your line weights to see what you're working with, and then start cleaning up the 2D. So I would go to my layers here, right? And if you go to your make 2D, you have clip and plane intersections, you see? So you have all of these clip and plane intersections. So everything in here, that's what's going to be cut. These are your cuts. So these are going to be the darkest lines. And then your tangents and your curves are going to be the lighter lines, right? These are the surfaces. These aren't the cuts. So these are always going to be lighter. So you can remember that, okay? And what's important to understand is that when you're going to set your color for your print, you want to go here, right? You can do your print color and print width. Just stick to this and just change your print width and print color. So if I zoom in here, right? I already have things in here that I already set up, but I just want to show you how I did it, right? So if I go to, for example, my print color. So if I go to my clipping plane intersection, let's do facade, for example. So clipping plane intersection, and we do facade, right? So facade is right here, right? Which is basically right here, this facade. I went here and I gave it a thickness of 0.13. And so when I zoom in on here, this is what's going to give me a good understanding of my thickness. And if I go here, I want to make sure print preview is on. So you're seeing how the line weights are changing in real time. And what I recommend doing is just give yourself a first pass on this and then just do and print it to see. And I'll show you how to print it. But basically, all I'm doing is I'm going in here, I click on here, and I'm going to change the line weights for my cuts to see how they feel. And you can put in a custom width if you want to, like 0.13, 0.125, okay? And so again, it's a trial and you want to test it out and see how it works and how it looks. So that's important. The same thing with the print color. So you see here, if I click here, I can change the print color to like dark gray, black, or even a color if you wanted to do that. So this is important because this is not your layer color. Just understand that. Your layer color is just for helping you differentiate things. But when it comes to actual printing, this is what is going to show up for your print color. Okay? And then the same thing for your line types. So if you want to have a dash line or a hidden line, you go here and you will change it for that layer. And then you can go in and change things individually on the properties menu. So up here in the properties menu, if you click on, so I double click in here, for example, and I click on here, I can go to my properties menu and I can change something very specific here. And I can even change the line type scale for that one specifically. Okay? And then you get out of it. So I'm back in the layout space. So just remember that when you double click, you go in the model space, double click out, you're in the layout space. So that's the basic methodology when you're coming to do your line weights. All right. In general, rule of thumb, you want to have a really good contrast of your cut with your surface and your hatch. So you should always read your cut and then your surface and then your hatch, and they shouldn't compete. Nothing should ever compete with your cut line. Right. But again, it's going to be a trial and error. Now, when it comes to cleaning up your drawing, just remember if you have like a symmetrical design like this, right? Don't go ahead and start like updating everything. Just update the things that can be mirrored. So like, let's say maybe you made a mistake with your framing, or a mistake with your window frame or the blocking or something like that, or your detail for a gutter. Don't do it for both, right? Just go in and fix it on one side, right? And then mirror everything. And the same thing for hatching. Don't go in and start hatching everything at once. Just hatch half of this and then mirror your hatching. It's going to save you way more time, and it's going to be less of a headache where if you made a mistake or you catch a mistake in one side, you don't have to go back and redo everything all over again, So just do half of your drawing if it's symmetrical, okay? If it's not symmetrical, then yeah, you would need to go in and do everything. But if it is symmetrical, then just, be very efficient and just do half of something and then just mirror it when you're completely done with it, okay? So far we've covered how to create like a sheet and how to modify the line weights and the line color and the line types. Now I want to show you how to import your line types and your hatches and things like that. So if I type in options, right, and you go to, let's start with the line types, right? You go to line types, and if you don't have these here, you can click on this reset button and it'll reset your defaults for you if you do that, okay? And then for hatches, right, I have a bunch of hatches here, right? So you can import hatches in Rhino. There just has to be a .pat file. So I use this website for my hatches. Let me show you the cathatch.com, and this is where I get my hatches, and they download as zip files, and then you can just unzip it to get the .pat file. And I use all of these for all of my drawings. And the same thing for my CAD blocks, for my vegetation, which I'll show you later in the video. For my Entourage, this is what I use. So it has a lot of categories like furniture, people. It's very, very helpful, and it really activates your plans and your sections. But again, this downloads as a zip, and then you can just extract the DXF and import it into Rhino. So you can import these file types in Rhino. So again, that hatch will do a .pat, and then the furniture or any type of vegetation blocks from CAD blocks will be in I think a DXF or DWG, which you can just import into Rhino. And so I'll click on import here. And I think for the Rhino 8, you can import multiple hatches at once, which is very helpful. I think for Rhino 7, you have to use like a script to import multiple hatches. But for Rhino 8, you can import multiple hatches. And so that's the next thing I'm going to show you is how to do hatching. Okay. So once you import it, you just do OK. All right, so when I do hatching, it's important to understand that the model space scale and the layout space scale are very different. So like for example, my model space scale is always going to be 1-to-1. So when I'm in here, my model space scale, like in actually top or perspective, is always 1-to-1. If I double click out of here, layout scale is going to be to the scale factor of what you're doing it. So this is at a 1/2 inch scale. So the hatches are going to show up differently on here versus what you see in your model space scale. Okay, so just to do a hatch and just to understand how to do hatches. So for example, I have a layer for hatches already. So if I go up here to hatch, for example, I'm going to activate it. And if I go to the right here, I'm going to actually change this to maybe, this is a little bit too light for the color. I'm going to make it a little bit darker, maybe like this type of gray for now, and I'll see how it looks like. If it looks a little too heavy, I'll make it a little bit lighter. Right? So that's number one. Number two is when I go in here, or I'm going to double click, and I want to do a hatch. And there's two ways of doing hatches, right? There's a way where you can hatch things individually. So if I do hatch, I do boundary yes. Okay, select curves. So for example, let's say these right here, I can select these, right? And then I can press enter. And if I know these are already closed, it's gonna detect if I like do A for all regions, right? See, it detected these right away for me. And then I can accept that and press enter. And see, it hatches it right away for me and a dialog doesn't come up, right? This like little wood grain hatch that I see here. And I can change the scale of it. Maybe like I want it to be much more dense. So like maybe like 0.25, right? So that's more dense. So if I double click out of here, there you go. So you see how these are hatched right now? So that's one way of doing the hatch, right? The other way is selecting things by region. So for example, if let me just go back to the model space by double clicking. Let's say I select like this whole thing, right? Right, and I type in hatch, right? It'll say click inside the region, right? So maybe like, for example, like I click inside here, you see? Then I can hatch that. I can keep clicking inside, but then they're all gonna be the same hatch, right? And so I don't wanna combine regions if you do this. So my preferred method is I like to select element by element and I hatch them. So like if I know all of my woods are gonna be this, I select all of my woods and I hatch those. And then I know my installation, I select all of my installations and I hatch those. And I start grouping them together so that I don't mix things together. That's how we do it. So for example, like these are my battens, right? So what I would do is I would go to like my battens layer. So click plane intersections. I think I have like a battens layer here, right? I'll do select objects and I'll isolate. Right, so that these are all isolated, right? So now I can just like go in, select these and do like hatch, right? And I can do A for all regions. There you go. And then I can just press enter there. So these are all hatched, right? And it'll maintain the same settings as last time. I do okay. And then I can just do, and then I would group these, to be honest. I would group them together. I can do unisolate. And there, now we're back. So now these are all hatched together. You see? And the same thing for insulation. So like for example, for my insulation, I would go in here and I would make sure that this is completely closed off, right? So I'm going to type in hatch. And for my insulation, for example, I want to get this region here, right? And I'm going to press enter. And I can do all regions or I'll just click inside of here, right? But I want to change this, right? I can just accept it. I can accept this default here as it is, right? And then I can go here and I can go to my properties and I can go to the drop down menu and find the insulation, whatever insulation I want. Maybe like I want the thermal bat insulation. I gotta find it up here. Bat insulation right here. That looks gross. I think first off, it's well, I don't like that one. There's another one. There it is, bad installation. There, so I want to rotate it, right? So I want to rotate it 90, and then the scale is it's too small, so I want to change the scale of this, right? I can change it to maybe, let's just do 1 to see how that looks. That's really big, so we'll do, okay, so this looks like it's shifted, so you can change the base point, right? If I click here, right, I can change the base point to see. Okay, so this is like almost there. Maybe, I don't know, 0.25. So maybe like it's 0.24. But you get the idea. There you go. Like that. But again, I would have went ahead and I would have just isolated anything that had like an insulation cavity and then hatched them by region. And then, like I said, I would go ahead and I would just mirror. Once you're finished hatching everything, you want to go ahead and just mirror it, right? So like take everything and mirror everything on the left side. Okay? So I'm going to fast forward through here and I'm going to show you how this looks with Entourage and people in here. So the next thing that I want to show is Entourage, because that's so important when you're doing Entourage, because when you're activating your section, it's also an elevation. You're not just looking at the wall section portion, you're looking at the interior space. So you want to activate it with actual people. So I have a bunch of Entourage. Again, like I said, I got it from that CAD Blocks website. And I have like a separate file where I compiled all of those blocks into one file. So let me just show you real fast. If I go here, right, I have all of these blocks that I typically use and like to put it in here. So these are all like in layer 0 blocks. And typically what I do is I just take them and I copy them and I paste into that file, right? So like, for example, maybe I take this person here, right? And then I can take maybe like a chair or something like that in elevation, like this. I do Control C. So I just do Control C, right? I'll go here, I'll do Control V. It's actually going to paste in the 0, 0 point of the original file. So let me actually go to my top view over here and zoom out because it's going to be like all the way over here. Yeah, you see. And I'm going to move it right here. Right? And so if you don't need to trim anything, just, you just you're going to place your block in the space and that's it, right? However, if you're going to, let's say this person is standing in front of this chair like that, right? Because you want to give some depth, right? What I'm going to do then is I'm going to do something called like explode block, right? I know this is not touching the ground. Let's make these both touch the ground, right? I can do explode block. If I do explode block, right? I want to take this one and explode it, right? Then I'm going to do trim, right? And I can select both of this. I can select this, right? And trim that off, right? There you go, and you're done. Oops, I didn't get his feet, but you basically get the idea. Like that. Okay? So that's very, very important to understand. So I'm going to again show you a bunch of sections that I did where I fully populated it. And I did all of the trimming. I did all of the hatching in Rhino. The only time I'll do my hatching in Illustrator is if it gets very complex. But I want to do the vast majority of my hatching in Rhino, okay? And another thing I just want to point out real fast, if you notice here, you see how the hatching looks really dense here. But if I go back to my layout space and I double click outside of here, you see how it looks like it's to scale? Because the scale of this sheet is different. The scale factor of this sheet is different than model space. Model space is 1-to-1 right now. This is very different, right? So that's why these looks different. So don't get fooled when you see it in model space. Even when I double click in here, I'm technically like in model space, but I'm in model space in layout view. So it's still gonna maintain the scale factor of it, right? So if I wanna go to like true model space, you have to go back here, right? So again, that's all you're doing basically in terms of hatching, right? You're gonna hatch everything here and start adding entourage and liven this up. What I did models, I did model like my millwork, right? If I go back to my perspective, just to show you, And let me just turn off this clipping plane. Like if you see my space, I modeled the major elements, right? Nothing serious, just major architectural elements like the millwork and this shelf here and this like folding wall. That's it. Everything else I'm going to draw in two-dimensionally. So again, that's what I mean. Like, don't over model, don't under model. Just understand what you can modify two-dimensionally versus what you can't, and you actually have to model it. So be very efficient in that, right? Don't try to over model things and waste time, especially as a student. You don't have that much time, you know? So looks very basic, but once we do 2D elements, entourage, hatches, it's gonna look way more detailed, okay? So let me just go back to my space here. So again, I'm gonna fast forward through this video and I'm gonna show you how this section looks after I've placed all of my entourage. And I'll explain to you, how I place my entourage and things like that. And the hatching, and I'll show you dimension styles and things like that. Okay. Okay, so now we're back with the hatches complete and the entourage placed the way I like it. And as you can tell, it's a huge difference. So let me just go back to the top view real fast, right? So let me just scroll down. This is what we started with, right? Down here, right? And again, I went in and started doing all the hatches, right? Put in the entourage, and that's all I'm basically doing. I'm just taking blocks and I'm putting it in here. I'm trimming where I have to trim. So for example, let me grab just another block just so you understand what I'm doing here, right? Let me copy this one, move it here. So for example, if this chair is in front, right, I'm going to trim the window frame, right? I'm going to trim the window frame. Right? I showed it to you in the previous segment, but I just want to reiterate a lot of things here so you understand what's going on. So that's basically what I'm doing here in these sections. Okay, so in these sections here, I'm just placing entourage and then trimming what I have to trim. So like for example here, you see, like I'm trimming the knee, right? And if I have to do block, if I have to explode the block to do it, I'll do it, right? So another good example is here. You see I'm trimming that person's knee right there. You get it? Here I'm trimming the architectural element of the window, right? Same thing here, I'm trimming the corner of this window frame here. This vase I'm trimming. So it's important to understand that you have to give like this sense of depth even in your elevation view. You don't want everything to be on the same line. You want there to be depth, right? Because that helps with activating the section or activating the elevation, for example. It's very important that you do that. And then again, when we come in here with the hatches, like I said, I'm only hatching half of this. I'm not hatching the entire thing, except for this wall space here. I'm only hatching literally half of this architectural section here, and then I'm mirroring it. And you can even see the mirror line right here, but it's not a big deal because when you export it, you're not even going to see it. And mind you, I took this entire element and I put it over for the next section. So I'm not redrawing this again. I'm literally taking this whole thing and I'm putting it for the other section looking this way. And let's say, for example, you only have one window. Then you just want to mirror on the other side. That's it. If you only have one window instead of two windows, right? Or maybe you have like a window and a solid wall. If you have that, right, then all you're going to do is just like delete this and just stretch that up above, right? That's all you're going to do. So that's why it's important to understand when you're modeling these things that you want to model it as efficiently as possible. So that don't spend too much time on 2D space or 3D space, depending on the representational style you're going to give. Let me cover my line weights again, right? So let me go back to here. Let me double click, go back in paper space. So if you notice here, right, like because this is at 1/2 inch scale, if I go to my clipping plane, right, for my clipping plane, right, everything is basically a black, right? And the majority are the exact same line weights. When you're like at around a 1/2 inch scale for your section, I made everything like around the same line weight. Something might be a little bit thicker, something's gonna be a little bit lighter. So for example, the majority of these are like at 0.22. The only thing that's kind of like embellished is like my membrane line at the 1/2 inch scale. That's about it, right? But everything else is very much the same. If I zoom in here, you see like everything is basically the same line weight, same line cut, right? Don't want to overcomplicate it at a 1/2 inch scale. There's some things in here, like for example, my glass, right? So I go up here, because the glass is really close to each other, I made that a 0.13 instead of like a 0.22 or a 0.2. Okay. And then I also have like this like thick frame outline that I did around here, right? That I made. So if I scroll up for my frame outline, it's like up here, right? So frame outline right there, right? That's a 0.08. Still not that thick. So if you see here, I made this really light, the actual window frame, because it's all these tiny lines that are close to each other. So, but I gave the actual frame itself a thick outline around there. And a really good way of doing that is doing the curve Boolean command. If you want to do like these thick outlines over things real fast, over complex things, I do curve Boolean. So let me double click in here. So I'm going to copy this frame like this. So up here, I'm going to do a rectangle around that. And then I'm going to do curve Boolean. Right? And then I'll click inside the region. You want your output to be curved. Simplify is fine. It'll get rid of redundant points. And you see that? It'll give me a thick outline, and then you just press enter, and then it'll generate this as an outline. Okay? I already have it, but I just wanted to show you how to do it. It's very helpful. Okay, great. So just to recap, what we did to get this is first we set up the sheet size, right? We set up the sheet size on the model space, and then we did the layout, right? To see how it fits on the sheet. That's number one. Then number two is we started doing line weights, right? So we go into the clipping plane and we start adding line weights to these things. And you want to make sure, let me just double click out here when you're doing the line weights, that you're in the print preview mode, okay? Okay. And then once we do that, you want to do your line weights and your line types. And then once you have your line weights and line types, you want to start doing your hatches. And so let me just recap the hatches again, just so we understand what we're doing here. Let me just double click in here. The way that I prefer to do hatches is number one, I like to have a separate hatch layer, and I have that active. And then I start to select each element on its own, and I hatch those on their own. So if I go again back to my battens, right, I'll do select objects. Right, and I want to isolate, right? So now it's isolated all of my battens, right? I can go in here, I can select those, do hatch, and in this instance, I want to do A for all regions, right? And press enter, and I'll get all of them like that. And so now it'll give me the hatch dialog, and you set the scale that works well in layout view. And then I'll press OK, right? And then what I like to do is I like to group them. So like each time I do, I'll do like cell hatch, for example, cell hatch, right? And then I will just group these together. So now those are grouped together. You see? And then I can unisolate. Then I'll do the next one. So for example, when I do my facade, for example, I can go on facade, select objects, right? Isolate. You see that? And then I can just select these. Again, ignore this. I would only do half of them and then mirror everything else. And then do hatch, right? I can do A for all regions. And if it's not closed, I can click inside the regions that are bounded, right? Enter. Exact same dialogue, and just do OK, then you just cell hatch and group, okay? So it's really important you do that methodology. If you do not have things that are closed and bounded, you have two options. Again, you can either close it off by adding, line work to it. Like for your installation, you can just do rectangles and just hatch those rectangles, or you keep things on and hatch them within the boundaries they are, right? So for example, I'll give you a good example. Let's say, for example, you want to hatch this cavity here, right? You can either just draw a rectangle around it and then hatch it like that, or let me just turn off this hatch. Let me make this active real fast, right? So I can do like hatch, right? Boundary, I could select all of these as a boundary, for example. Enter. And like for this cavity, for example, right? You can click right there, you see? Or maybe like this cavity right here, you see? You could do it like that method as well. If there's things that are not closed polylines, I typically like to keep things as closed as much as possible. But if not, you can do this as another method for your hatching. Just understand that, like for example, that's how I did it for this wall here. And then I added the reveals later. Let me turn my hatch back on. Okay, I just want to go back and re-emphasize the line weights in the hierarchy before I go to dimensions. Again, I made basically all the cuts the same line weight at this scale, 0.22, 0.2. The only thing that's a little bit closer, 0.13, is like things that are closer together, like the glass, for example. And then my curves, if I go down here, you see my regular curves are very light, like 0.05. So basically anything that's surface like this is 0.05, right? Or even hairline. So everything that's like surface is a little bit above hairline. Right, so like 0.05, for example, okay? And if I zoom in here, you see there's like gaps. I'm giving gaps for my membrane layers, for example. You see, it's not like this is touching exactly. You want to give yourself just like a little bit gap so you can show the dashed line for your membrane layers, all right? And then if you look at the colors, a lot of things are pretty light when it comes to blocks. So like, for example, if I go to I think 0 is my blocks layer, which is basically everything that I put in here. These are my blocks layer. That's definitely going to be hairline, but then, or default is basically hairline. It's actually a gray color, for example. See, let me just double click on here. See, it's like a 20% black. And then the insulation is very light. If I go in here, which I think is the hatch layer, I made that very light. So if I go to hatch, it's again hairline, and it's like this like gray or light gray color, right? Because I want it to pop. I want the section to pop. And I'm going to show you the print settings afterwards. Okay, so next thing I want to show you are the dimensions. So if I scroll down here, I actually have the dimensions here. If I go to dims, you see I have dimensions here. I like to use the dots. You don't have to use the dots. You can use the tick marks if you want to. But there's one thing in here I want to talk about is actually this line is actually not showing correctly. I need to update these lines. You see, it's like this center line, but it's not showing. I'll show you in model space what to do. But in general, I like to have my elevation markers and then my dimensions with my elevation markers. And you want to do a dimension style when you do this. So this is at a 1/2 inch scale. So if I do options and I go to annotation style, I already have one that's 1/2 inch scale. When you click on this, this is what makes, and if you did okay, that makes it active. Like that makes it the default one when you type in dimension. So if I do edit, for example, you can do edit or new, right? Style name, I'm gonna give it a style name of a 1/2 inch. So model space scale. Okay, this is very important. So in model space scale, I actually want to make it 2. Even though the scale factor of 1/2 inch scale is 24, I want to make it 2. It's really important to understand that. And let's say it was 1/4 inch scale, it'll be 4. 1/8 inch scale will be 8. Okay, so that's important to understand. So for 1/2 inch scale, I made it 2. And so the couple things that I just adjusted here is for my arrows, I'm doing dots, and I made them a little bit smaller at 0.10. And then for length units, it's up to you, like the precision, 1 inch precision versus 1/2 inch versus 1/4. That's how detailed you want it. I definitely do no zero suppressions. That means I want to show my zeros. And then feet inches for sure, because that's the units I'm working in, but you can do decimal or metric. It's all up to you. So if I go to my font, you see this is the actual physical height it's going to be at when you print it, right? It's going to adjust the text height like in your model space. But in the font space, like in the paper space, it's always going to be 0.125 inches tall. It's always going to output as 0.125 inches tall in real life print. However, you just need to make sure it's proportional to your drawing, okay? So, if you want like a bigger scale factor, right? So like, for example, this is, if I did like 1 inch or if I did 3 inch scale, right? So for example, you can do new, right? And you can base it off of a copy of something else. Like, I don't know, we can base it off a copy of this and you want to give it a name. So like we can call it like 3 inch, right? I do okay. If I go here, I can edit this. I edit it. And if the scale is bigger, like 3 inch scale, then this is going to end up being 0.25. You see? So it's just going to start becoming smaller and smaller when you have a bigger and bigger scale. The text is going to get tinier and tinier because you're going to be more zoomed in. And the dots are going to be smaller. Everything's going to adjust. So like the more zoomed in you're in with your annotation style, the smaller text is going to be, the smaller the dots are going to be. So, I have one at 1 inch scale, 1/2 inch scale, 3 inch scale, right? So if I do 0.25, do apply. but I want to make sure that, let me click here. I want to make sure this is actually okay for half inch scale. So if you see here, right, like right now, I want this to be center lines. It's just because the line type scale is a little bit off. So if I double click in here, let me just click on these, go to my properties. You see the line type scale is huge, it's 24. Like if I click here, click on these, I can make this just 1 for now. You see how they come back now? Click here, you see? Now you can see the center line again. Because on model space scale, I gave it a model space scale sizing. So just realize that when you're in paper space, right, it's gonna have its own scale. Even this text is a little off, right? Like you see this text is a little bit smaller than this. In reality, these should all be the same size. This is incorrect. Like these should all be the same size. So I would actually make this text a little bit bigger, but I'll just keep it like this for now, okay? So when I dimension things, right, let me just go to, I can dimension things on here if I wanted to. I can go here, right, I can type in dim, right, and I can, and you see this is the annotation style it's using right here. And, you know, I can just start to click on things and dimension things the way I like. So I like to dimension, this is like the overall width, but here, I'll just dimension this, for example. Right? And then you can adjust this, for example, this center point here, right? This center point, this adjusts the actual text location. So if I move this, you see how the text moves with it, and it'll give it an extension leader, right? And then you can, obviously, if you click these grip points here, that's going to change the location reference of the dimension. And you'll get like a history warning when you do that. Like maybe I want a dimension to here, like that instead. See how it changes? You can do okay, right? And you see here, this is zero suppression. This is no zero suppression. This is where it shows the zero, like 0 feet, 9 inches. If you want zero suppression, it'll just show 9 inches. That's what zero suppression is. But yeah, that's basically what I'm doing with my dimensioning, right? Just close this. So let me just go ahead now and show you the print settings when I print this. So if I do Control P for print. So for your print settings, you want to make sure that you're on vector output, you're on print color. That's important. That means that you're doing the print color, like the actual color you assign to it on that layer that I showed you in the layers dialog, right? And then you want the scale to be basically 1:1, and you can use this sheet size, which is this, is that 1:1, right? And then you want to do match pattern definition. Don't do match viewport display, do match pattern definition, because that's going to be what you assign in your layers panel. You can keep this all default, right? Same thing here. You don't have to change anything here. I don't want to get background color. And then you do print and obviously save it as a PDF, okay? And again, I would recommend that you do a test of this, like do a test of these line weights. You might have to go back and forth. You might like how it looks, you might not like how it looks. So you need to go back and forth and do tests of these things, you know, when you do it. So you'll do print and then you'll do okay. And I'll show you the print. Let me transition over and show you the print. So here I am. This is the actual PDF. You see? So this is me with the actual PDF exported from the Rhino. Nothing. I didn't touch this in Illustrator whatsoever. So the line weights look very elegant. You know, maybe we can make the hatches just a little bit darker for this wood hatch, but you just don't want to be too busy, right? You don't want to be too busy. But I mean, I personally like these line weights. I think they read fantastic. You know, there's something a little bit sharp and nice about it. I think that again, the text height should have been more coordinated, right? Like, so this isn't good. Like, you don't want this to be small. You want all the text to be the same size, okay? When it comes to dimensioning annotations, you want them to be the same size. So this is actually not good. You want this to be the same size. So watch out for that, right? But yeah, I think, again, this is straight out of Rhino, you know? So this is one method. This is the first method. If you want to do things straight out of Rhino, you can still take it into Illustrator, and that's going to be the second method I'm going to show you. But this is for people who just want to stick in Rhino, right? And like you can do more fun things, like you can add a hatch background to this if you wanted to, right? You can do things like that. But again, I think line weights look great. Hatches look great. I think the line weights look very nice at this sheet size. And I'm zoomed in, right? I'm zoomed in very much. I can go even more. 75. This is at 100%. You see? At 100%, things look really sharp. Looks very proportional. Like the line weights look proportional. Nothing looks out of whack. The membrane reads as well. It doesn't read that well over here. Could have made it a little bit thinner here, but membrane reads. Okay. And again, going back to this idea of efficiency, don't overmodel, don't overdraw, be efficient. Don't make things super customized. So like, let's say, for example, you didn't have an opening here. Let's say this is just a solid wall, right? You could technically just grab this wall and just mirror it on this side. Don't draw it from scratch again. Just take one element that you know is going to be repetitive and just mirror it where you have to, or copy it where you have to. It's so important. Do not overdraw. Do not overmodel, do not overdraw. At the same time, don't undermodel, don't underdraw. But you see what happens when you add hatches, when you have proper line weights, when you have an active entourage. It really changes the feel of a section. It goes from something super basic and boring to something that's a little bit more active and has more depth to it, right? And again, I'm going to show you this when it's all hatched up on the Illustrator side of things. I just think, let me go back to this one. I mean, like, this just feels very, the original section was very basic, but when you see this, it changes the entire feel of the space, okay? One other thing that I want to show actually is how this looks if you wanted to do like a really big detailed drawing, right? So let me just go back to this sheet here. Let me zoom out. Let's say you want to do like a really big detail, right? Let me just go here. Let me change the crop of this. Let me just move this over here like this. And then I'm actually going to copy this detail view. I'm going to copy it. Go right here like this. And then let me click on this frame right here. Let me just move it to the corner. So on this frame here, right, I'm gonna go to properties. I'm gonna unlock it. And I wanna change the scale. Let's do like maybe like 2 inches equals a foot, right? So I can do 2, right, 1, enter. So this is like very zoomed in now, you see? And let me just pan, let me double click inside. Let me pan maybe something like this, right? So now you have a regular section and like a zoomed in section. Let me double click outside like that. You see? When you do that, everything scales with it though. So see, this is why it's important to do this on like 2 separate drawings. You see right here? You see how this scales with it? Right? That's not good. That's why I like to have it on 2 separate files. I wanted you to watch out for that. So I'm going to transition over now and I'm going to show you how to take this type of file and take it into Illustrator. There's just a little tweaks that you have to do in Rhino before you take it into Illustrator. Okay, so again, this is the method for people who just want to work in Rhino. They don't want to go to Illustrator world. The next segment of this video is going to be for people who like to transition from Rhino to Illustrator to do their line weights and to do their hatches. And then at the very end of this video, I'm going to show you how to do layouts and how to do like the colored version of these drawings and think about bigger details as well, like zoomed in details by taking with what you have. So in this segment, I'm going to show you how to take your Rhino file into Illustrator for line weights and hatches. So up until this point, what you would have done is you would have cleaned up your lines, you would have done your hatches, you would have done your dimensions, you would have placed your entourage, right? The only hatch I'm leaving out is the hatch that are like in very organic or like complicated areas. So like in my background, right? So like I want to leave this background alone and I want to do the hatch in Illustrator for that. But everything else I do in Rhino. Okay. Another important thing to watch out for, you notice here, I have the dimension strings for both of them, but for this one, I don't have the elevation markers because the elevation markers are going to be pretty much the same for all of my sections. I only want to have one element because just in case later down the line when I'm doing my line weights in Illustrator, I find out I want to change something. I don't want to change it for all of them. I just want to change for one of them, and then when it's like final, then I'll just copy it over to the other ones. I don't want to go in and start changing too many things at once. So that's why if you notice, I only have things that I know for sure are unique to the drawing. But everything else that's gonna like a module or is gonna be replicated, I only have it there once. And when I'm actually like done finalizing it, then I'll start copying it over to the other drawings. So just getting in that mindset of like trying to be as efficient as possible in your drawing is very helpful in saving time, especially in an academic setting. Other thing is that I have this little sample hatch here because I want to take this hatch with me to Illustrator and make a custom hatch out of it. This is like the little wood grain hatch, right? So I want to take this with me into Illustrator, and because you can make a custom hatch out of that. And if you see here, I zoomed in here, I have this very like close-up detail of things over here. I have this because I want to make my section really detailed at like a 3-inch scale section, but at a 1/2-inch scale, you're really not going to see it, right? So that's the other thing, is that there's elements in here that you're not going to see at a 1/2-inch scale, but you'll see like at a 3-inch scale. So like when I take it to Illustrator, I'll show you, I'm just going to hide these and either hide them or just delete them for the 1/2-inch scale drawing. Lastly, I want to make sure that the hatches are at correct scale, right? So I had to go back in here and I had to adjust the scale of my hatches because now I'm exporting from model space. I am not exporting from paper space. So if I go to properties, right? If I click on this, if you see the hatch scale on this, it's going to be around 0.46. I think in layout space, it's around 0.23 or something like that. So that's something to keep in mind, right? In layout space, the hatch scale is going to be much more different. But in model space scale, right, you might be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. You don't know. So keep that in mind. When you take it from Rhino to Illustrator, you're exporting from the model space if you want to do the line weights in Illustrator, because you want to maintain all the lines and the color of the lines and the layering. So I had to make sure that this was all correct. All the scales of my hatches were correct. And once you hatch it, you can do it here. And again, if you forgot, you can change the base point, right, by clicking here, and it'll change like where the hatch starts, for example. But then everything else pretty much stays the same, right? So like this is everything. Oh, I added this in here. So I changed it for this one. I added this guy in here. A fireplace. I liked it. So for example, here I changed the line type scale. So if I go here, its line type scale is 24. You see? I can readjust it some more in Illustrator, but I did it on here anyway. Okay? So again, just remember that once you take it up to this point in Rhino, make sure everything's at the correct scale, especially your hatches. All right? The other thing is just the sheet size again. So we're going to use this reference rectangle that you see here as the scaling sheet size. And that's how we're going to scale our drawing in Illustrator. It's a very easy reference to use. And so just in case you forgot, I'll do a rectangle from the center, right? And I'll do 2 feet by 3 feet, right? And you just scale it by a factor of 24 because that's the scale factor of a 1/2-inch scale. And you just rotate it, and that's gonna, so again, that's just gonna be a reference sheet size, okay? You can put that over your drawing. This is really important. This is what's gonna help you scale things. So we're gonna do export and select objects to export, right? I'm gonna press enter, and we're gonna do Illustrator file, right? And we'll just call it just anything test. And then I want to do snapshot of current view. I don't want to give it a scale. Snapshot of current view, because if you want to do current scale, this needs to be at the 0, point. And then it doesn't matter. You can pick whichever color space you like, whether print or digital. And then what's really important is that I want to get order layers. That's really important. That's going to keep your layers organized. Like it'll group the clipping plane intersections together. It'll group the curve layers together. It's very important that you have that. And then you click OK. And I'm going to transition over to Illustrator now. So here we are in Illustrator. If you get this dialog to update legacy text, go ahead and update it because that's going to make your text editable in Illustrator, okay? So if you can tell, everything looks really weird and gross right now, right? The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to scale this up to the proper size. You want to make sure that your sheet size is correct, right? So if I go to my document setup, right, over you can go to File, Document Setup to change the sheet size, right? Or you can just go, you can click on this icon right here that looks like these little crop symbols, and you can change the width and height. So mine's already at 24 by 36, so I'm good. So you can just click on the direct selection tool if you wanted to. So I'm going to select this right here, and I'm going to go to, once it selects, I'm going to go to transform, and I'm going to transform it to the actual width of the sheet. So if I go to transform on the top right corner right here, I want to make sure it's linked. I want the width to be 36 inches. 36. Okay, great. So now everything is to proper scale now. This is at a 1/2 inch scale on a 24 by 36 sheet. Okay, it's very important that you get that. That's why we do these reference sheet sizes. You could scale it to the correct size in Rhino, but again, you want to make sure it's on the 0, 0 point, because if it's not on the 0, 0 point, it's going to fly off the artboard and you won't even find it. Okay, now right off the bat, what I want to do is let me just turn off my hatch layer because that's taking up a lot of space. And you see here, this is what order layer is. You see how your order layers, it'll make all of the make 2Ds together. So that's really helpful. So you know right what you're dealing with. So like, for example, I want to turn off my hatch layers because it takes up a lot of space, like a lot of memory. And I want to turn off my dimensions as well for now. Okay, I want to work with this for now. And what I want to do is I want to make all of the line weights the same for right now, just so I can easily read it. If I select everything here, right, I'm going to make everything just a 0.1 line weight. And luckily everything's by layers, so like I can change the colors of things if I wanted to. Right? So now everything's just 0.1. And then I can start to go in and I can start to change the line weights of like my cuts, for example. What I want to do though is I want to select everything again, and I just want to make everything black for now. So I can go here, hold shift, I can just give everything 100% K value right here. Great. So now everything is black and everything has like this 0.1 line weight, okay? Again, don't forget my hatches are turned off and my dimensions are turned off. I want to go in here and I want to just start to give things thicknesses, right? I know what my cuts are. So if I like click here, I know that's a cut. Hold shift, I know this is a cut. I know that this is a cut. This is a cut. That's a cut, right? And if I go here, say these are a highlight, I can hold shift and just click on these little circular dots. That will select everything in that layer, right? And I'm going to give all these the same line weight of like 0.5. You need to know what sheet size you're in, okay? Just remember that. If you have like a bigger sheet size or a bigger detail, the line weights might be bigger or lighter. But I want that 1/2 inch scale, 1/4 scale, maybe 1 inch scale. You want a lot of the cuts to be the same. It's not until you hit like 1.5, 3 inch where you can have more hierarchy of your cuts. So I'll make that 0.5. You see how that just pops right away? Like that? That helps a lot. So I know for sure this is also a cut. My installation is also a cut, right? If I click on this, right, that's 0.5. Again, this will select everything, that's 0.5. Now for like the surface layers, right? Things that are surface, things that are not cut. So for example, like this, remember this little frame guy that we had here? That's door frame, right? I'm gonna select that. I want that to be really light, right? I don't want that to be like this. This in itself should be much lighter. I can make that like maybe a 0.08. And I'm actually gonna make it like a gray, you know, just because I don't want it to get in the view. Maybe like an 80 or like even honestly a 70%, because I don't want it to be too much in my view. Like that. And then, okay, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna turn on my hatch, okay? And I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to turn all of my other layers off except the hatch because it's easier to work with. There we go. So you see, these are all of my hatches from Rhino. So in Rhino, hatches are actually fills. Like when you bring it into Illustrator, from Rhino, they're fills. They're not strokes, right? So I want to actually switch it from a fill to a stroke. So if I go here, I want to give it like a color of, not too light because it's going to be very hard to read on Illustrator. I want to give it a color maybe of like, maybe 90. And 0.1 line, 0.1 line weight. And I don't want to give it a fill, no fill. Like that, yeah, very nice. And then the same thing, I can just select this whole thing here and do I to select it. Very good, just to copy the sentence. Very good, so we have that set. And then if I go back to my dims, my dimensions, right, turn this on. Now you see the dimension, I mean, this is on a weird layer. But for my dimensions, there's a couple things I want to fix. Like you see these dash lines here. These are way too thick. I can just go here to select same line stroke weight, right? And I can make that maybe a 0.15, like that, very nice. And then same things with these. If I do the group selection tool over here, I can select these, right? And do the exact same thing. I'm gonna do select by stroke weight. If I go here, make it like 0.15. There you go. You see? Maybe I don't like the size. Maybe like I like the size of this text, not this. If I click here, right, I can go select same text object. I can go to object, transform each. Again, I'm just showing you as an example, transform each. Center, 50, 50. Yeah, 50. Or maybe 75. Yeah, that feels much better. That feels more proportional. I'm just giving you an example. I'm going to go back and adjust all these. The same thing with these dots here. These dots look a little bit too big in my opinion. I'm going to do select, I want to do select by appearance this time. Like that, and do object transform each. And I'll make these the same thing, 75% smaller. Like that, there you go. That feels better. Very nice. Go ahead, let me turn everything back on. Okay, so now things are back on. Things are looking good. So for example, these plants, I might want to make them just a little bit lighter if they're right. It's this 0 layer right here. I can turn everything off if I wanted to. Right, I can turn everything off. Just keep the plants and the blocks if I wanted to. Make it like maybe just a little bit lighter. You see, these are all my blocks here. It's a preference. I like it at 0.1, to be honest. But if you wanted to, that's why it's good to work in layers. Always work in layers. You have to work in layers, keep things organized, right? And maybe make it like 90. Because 0.1 is a very thin line weight, to be honest. Also, if you see here, I want to change this line, this stroke weight right here. You see that? So if I go here, I can do select same stroke, or by, I think appearance is fine. Right? And here, this is the center option. So I want to do honestly like half of it. So we can go like 35 by 777. It's basically dash gap, dash gap, dash gap. That's how you do a center line. Like that. So now I have 2 of these now instead of 1, which feels good. Another important thing to do is for your strokes, you want to make sure that all of your strokes have a proper endpoint. So you see right now, everything is default on a round cap and round corner. We don't want that because it makes it feel a little bit too cartoonish. We want things to be squared off, not rounded off. Let me zoom in to show you what I'm talking about. So like you see right here how this is like rounded off. I don't like that. Like you want things to be squared off. So like this is just a good example. Like I go here, right? I want that corner to be square. You see, I want it to be squared off. Okay. So I'm gonna go in and just adjust some of the, just more of the hatches and adjust some of the line weights. For example, this is like the membrane layer I haven't done. So like, you know, on the membrane layer, let me find the membrane. I can click on it if I don't know where it is. If I click on this, right there, that's the membrane layer. Like that should be this nice thick line, right? Because it's a membrane layer. And I want to make it a dash line too. So if I go here, I want to change this to, see the dash is massive on this. I want that one. It has to be like, and this will be blank. Like that, you see? That's the dash line for that. Honestly, it can be even less than that, maybe like 2. There you go. Like that. Again, though, you see how it's rounded? We don't like that. We want it to be nice and sharp. Let me go here. Like that. Okay, I'm going to also show you the hatches. So what I'll do is I'll show you how to do the custom hatch, and I'll show you how to hatch it, and then I'm going to fast forward to this to show you just the final look of this. So here's a hatch that we have here, right? You need to be careful because this is the live hatch from Rhino, okay? So whatever you sample is gonna, that's how it's gonna look. So right now this is really light, okay? So I can flip it and change the stroke weight, right? So I can flip this. So it's as a fill, I want it as a stroke, right? That's still too thick. Do it as 0.1 or like 0.15. I don't want it to be black. Maybe we'll do 0.15. Let's see how this feels. That's not bad, like that. And I'm gonna select it. I'll do Control G for group. I can do object group as well if I wanted to. And then in my swatches panel, right, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna take this, right, and I'm gonna put it right here, like that. So now this becomes a swatch. And if it's not seamless, I can double click inside of it and change the seams if I wanted to. So like if I double click in here, right? See, I can go in and I can change the seams. Like I can make things connect if I want to, right? Or maybe I can do brick by row to see if that's more connecting, you know? Gotta see which one works best. If you do grid, for example, like you can make things connect, right? Like you can take this one, for example, and bring it in there. Take that, bring that in there like that. You can, you know, even adjust this a little bit like this. Just that like that. So you get the idea. And then you would just click done, for example. So if we have our swatch here, for example, right, and I click on it, it's now a swatch, you see? It's become a swatch now. Has a fill and everything. So now if I want to make this, like now I want to fill this in right here, right? What I want to do is I want to turn some things off because I don't want to take up too much memory. What I want to do is, like, for example, I want to turn off my dimensions. I actually want to turn off my hatch as well, like that. And I want to keep everything else though, okay? So if I go in here, let me take this, and this. I'm going to paste it into this layer. I want to make sure paste this. I toggle a lot. Paste members layer. That's helpful if you want to keep your layers when you paste it into another file. But sometimes you don't want to do that, but I want to paste it into the 0 layer. Control F pastes it in place. like that. Let me just turn this off. I also don't want these reveals. So if I go to my reveal, I'm gonna turn this off as well. Nice, okay, this is what I want. So if I take this, I'm gonna take this guy and I'm gonna duplicate it down here. Okay, while I'm at, so I'm gonna make a new layer. I'm gonna call it hatch new. Okay, it's important. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a live pane of this. Make sure that you save your file before you live paint this, okay? So you wanna make sure you save your file before you live paint it. So I'm gonna press K for live paint. And I'm gonna click in here. I'm gonna do continue. So you see now I can, this is all into little regions now that I can hatch into. I actually want to add a little background around this. So I can actually add to my live paint. So if I go to hatch new, and I'm going to just make like an invisible rectangle behind there. Right here at this like ground level. Like that. And I'm going to select something like this at the same time. Again, once it's live painted, it's grouped. Your object, live paint, merge. You can do continue. Okay, great. So now I have things as a, so I press K, you see, now I can live paint around this. I can live paint in here. Awesome. So I want to test out that swatch that I had, right? So if I go back to my swatches panel right here, click right there, that custom swatch I made for that wood grain, I can see how it like looks on here. So you see that's like this, that's going to be the scale of the grain on here, you know, which isn't bad. If I press E to transform it, right, it'll be a little bit more small, but like, let me just show you. If I go here, if I do transform scale, again, I just want to make sure scale and stroke effects are on there, okay? Okay, so we have this here as a good sample, right? If I do I for the sample tool, like that, I do K. It's not bad. Not bad. No, it's good. You know, go down here, get this. See, this is like more organic, right? So that's why I don't want to do it in Rhino, although you can do it in Rhino. There's nothing wrong with doing it in Rhino. It's just easier in Illustrator, right? Get under here. Fantastic. I'm gonna press V to get out of the selection. And then maybe for the background, I want to do like this like dotted hatch. So if I go to my swatches panel, I got my swatches panel. If I go into here and I go to patterns, basic graphics, textures, I can do, for example, stipple irregular, stipple fine, shifting sand. And it just, once you click on it, it adds it over there. We can see how these look like. That's sandy dry lake. Let's see how that looks. Let me zoom in on here. Yeah, this looks good. Like that. If I do I, I'm gonna do K. There you go. I want that as my background, you see? And you know, also here as well. And I can go and hash these in. I already have this done, but I'll show you the finished version of this. But I think this looks great. Also, I can hatch this like solid white if I wanted to, the pipe over here. Because I noticed the reveal goes underneath it. That's why I'm hashing that solid white. But I think this looks cool. I gotta click on it. Object, live paint, expand. And then you want to ungroup it. It's important. So let it expand. And what it does is it's going to separate all of the hatches from just the line work. And then I can take those hatches and move it where I want. After it expands, I'm going to click on and do ungroup. Right? Nice. And so if I click on here, you see, now it's only selecting the hatches by itself, nothing else. If I take this, you see, It's just the, and I can ungroup it even more. So I don't need this anymore unless you want to go back and rehatch things. So I'm just going to delete this for now. I want to make sure this is on the correct layer. So I want this on the hatch new layer. Do Control X to cut it. I'm going to click on this, do Control F, paste in place from the hatch new layer. Great. I want to move this here. And you know, this is a good reference right here. I can put. If it's too hard to see, I can do Control Y, right? To like snap to things in a more tight manner, right? Awesome. I'll do Control Y, get out of outline view. Nice. Like maybe I want this to be a little bit lighter of a hatch compared to this. So I can go here to the group selection tool with the plus sign, click here, right? Make it a little bit more faded, maybe like 80% or 70% maybe. And maybe this one's like an 80%, right? And maybe this hatch here. If I do here, I can do select by appearance. Yep, click there. You got it. See, it doesn't get the other hatches. It gets how it looks like that. Maybe this is also like 80% transparency. I don't want 100%. I want 80 because it's too busy of a pattern. I don't want it to pop too much, you know? And let me turn on my dimension layer. Turn on my reveal. I actually want to set my reveal behind this because you see how it's popping up. I want it behind that. So I'm going to drag my reveal, bring it underneath. There you go, like that. You see? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put each of these sections on their own sheet on Illustrator. I just did this on here just because it's quicker because of the line weights, because I want all the line weights to be good. But what I would do is after I set up the line weights for both of them, right, I would do the exact same thing. I would start to hatch these on its own as well. I don't want to hatch them together. I want to hatch this on its own. But this is the same process you would do for everything. You know, you would change the scale of line weights and change the scale of the hatches. So for example, just so you understand, like these hatches are editable. I can edit these hatches. Like you see this hatch here, for example, right? I can, let me just do this, right? I can scale this up, for example. Right? And then if I click here, I can change the scale of that hatch. I can sample it with the eye tool. You see? And then it changes the scale of the hatch. So you can still edit these as hatches. Okay? So I'm going to take each of these and put them in their own sheet. And I'm just going to, you know, kind of zoom in and show you other things that I did that I edited with, okay? Like the text and the annotation style and just some nuances. And then after that, I'm going to show you how to do the colored version, like, you know, blue sections, red sections, how easy it is to do it in Photoshop. And I'll show you final exports. Okay, so here I am in the final version of this section, and there's a couple things that I modified a little bit, right? Like I made the actual hatch just a little bit wider. I just stretched it to the left and to the right, which you can do quite easily. That's one thing. Other thing I did is the annotations you see here. So I have annotations over these. I typically like to do my annotations in InDesign, but when it comes to like details and sections where the annotation is really part of the drawing, I like to keep it in Illustrator. But just to reiterate, when the annotation is like part of the drawing, both in terms of layout, in terms of composition, in terms of aesthetics, I keep it with Illustrator. But if it's more exterior of the drawing, then I do it in InDesign. So what I did basically here is I have just like a little key system because it looks nice in terms of the layout style. I don't want to put anything in the drawing annotation wise. And I have things like this, you know, more laid out in terms of call outs with a list of the assembly system. I just like it like that. I think it's much cleaner. I don't want to make it too distracting. And so if you're just curious about my text style, I'm using Arial, nothing special, but I'm really playing with the tracking. The tracking is 200 point, I think. So if I go here, you see my tracking is 200. and it's Arial. So one's Arial black, this is Arial black, and this is Arial regular at like 80% color. That's it, 80% fill color. And then this is a dot, because I just want to keep my dots consistent. This is just a dot called out, you know, around like a quarter inch scale for half-inch scale drawing. And over here, what I did was I also just pulled these off the drawing a little bit, right? I gave these solid fills. Again, you see, this is why I do not do these for each drawing. I do it just for one, and then I start copying them over for the rest. Because I did some modifications, like I gave these triangles, the touchdown points for the elevation markers. I gave it a fill. And I also gave this a tracking of 200. Because before it didn't have a tracking. But yeah, that's basically it. And so you will do this exact same process for all of your sections if you want to do the Illustrator method. Let me just zoom in and make sure I'm not missing anything that, like, again, there's things you're not going to see at this scale, okay? There's things you're not going to see at this scale. However, what I like about Illustrator versus Rhino is that I can take this exact same drawing and I can scale it up to like a 3-inch scale drawing, and then just modify some of the line weights, and it's basically done for a large. But you have to keep in mind, you have to draw it precisely. Okay. You don't want to scale something up 3 times the size and the drawing is still very simple. I'm going to show you how to scale this up so that you can use that as a detail, and I'll show you the layouts for that as well. So here's the scaled up version of this for like a 3-inch detail. And what I do for this, the first thing is I change my sheet size. So for my sheet size, I made it a 72 by 72. So it's massive. It's like basically a 6 foot by 6 foot drawing, right? Then the next thing is I select everything and I do object, transform, scale, right? And I want to scale it up by like, 300%, for example. And then I want to make sure this is checked and click OK. And that's going to bump it up with the line weights. So all the line weights are proportionally scaled at the same time, okay? I already did it, so I'm going to press cancel, but I already did this. But you'll press OK. Now, you want to zoom in and make sure, because some things need to be changed, right? So like, for example, you see like I made these thinner. You see, some things get thinner, some things get thicker. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But in general, everything else is going to scale proportionally. Like I made this more dashed. In the 1/2-inch scale, it wasn't as dashed. I made it more dashed. Right? The hatches are going to be fine. They stay the same. These will stay the same. These are fine. It's just really like your dashed lines. Oh, see, for the detail, remember the detail I was talking about? Like, so these you'll start to see. You see, these you'll start to see this because the 3-inch detail is going to look something like this, right? So you're going to see something like this. And at the end of the video, I'll explain the assembly system, what's going on with the air movement, and the barriers and the assembly system in general. I'll show what's going on. But you see, this is like at a 3-inch detail. You'll see things like this. Let me pan down. Same thing here. At a 3-inch detail, this is what you're going to see, something like this. So at a 3-inch detail, the font size is going to change. You want to make it even smaller. This is messed up right here. Show me that closer. Okay, so the other element I want to show you is how to do colored plans. So I'm going to show you how to do that in Photoshop. It's very easy, okay? So let me just go back to here. So for example, let's say you're done with this file, right? You're done with this, like this is done with it. Everything's set up. You want to make sure you have it saved as an Illustrator, and then you will open up the Illustrator file in Photoshop, okay? You will open it up in Photoshop, okay? So let me open up the file in Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop. Let me just show you the dialog that you'll get when you open them in Photoshop. So I do File, Open, right? You want to find your Illustrator file. Maybe this one, right? I'm going to do Open. And you want to accept the defaults, 300 dpi. It's going to be a massive file, by the way. It's going to be really big. It's going to be a massive file, but it's going to be this right here, 300 dpi. You can accept the defaults and just do okay. Right? I already have these open, but you'll do okay. Make sure the resolution is 300, but you're going to open up the actual Illustrator file. It's very important to understand. All right? And so when you're in here, I'll open all of them up at the same time together, and I'll put them all in the same file. You can do file place as well. Instead of open, you can do file place if you want to do. But what I like to do then is I want to give, let's say you want to give this a color. Honestly, this doesn't look good as a preview. It looks much, much nicer. And I'll show you the final exports. But I just wanted to show you this. So when you do it in Photoshop, you just want to do selective color, right? So if I click here, you can do relative or absolutes, up to you. But absolute's just much easier to coordinate the colors. What you're going to change is the black and neutral color values. That's it, nothing else. Don't change the white, none of the, just the neutral and black. That's what you're going to change for the color values to get the colors that you like. And they need to match, very important, they need to match, right? So, this is the default. This is how it's selected default. Again, don't forget, this does not look good right now. When you have it as final, it looks great. So now you would do the selective color adjustment, right? And once you do selective color adjustment, you're going to go down to, for example, your neutral, right? So right now I have my cyan at 50, magenta at, I think, 30, and my yellow at -100. I'm going to keep the black as is. So if I bring this down, you see how it changes to almost like a magenta-ish color, right? So you see that? It's really your choice, but I like this color scheme, like 50. I like this blue. Blue looks nice for drawings. And the same thing for your black, right? I want this to be 50. And then I do Control Shift Alt S. And you'll get this .lx file is too big. And I'm going to save it as a PNG. And I do a PNG 24-bit color space. Very important. Do 24-bit. Don't do, I think, 16-bit. It's the other one. Do a 24-bit. And don't save it with transparency. Just save it as with like a white background. You can do transparency one too. The file might get a little bigger, but honestly, the file is not that bad. It's only 3.9 megabytes. Okay, I'm going to go back and show you the final exports. I'm going to show you the final exports of the detail that I worked on as well. I'm going to show the final export of that 3-inch detail drawing that I showed you. Show you final exports of the layouts for the half-inch scale sections, and then also the color versions of these sections. Okay, so I want to show you the final exports of these sections. So this is from Illustrator, and I just have these exported as very high quality JPEGs. You don't have to do that. You can do it as PDFs if you want to, but I just have them as very high quality JPEGs, 300 dpi. And as you can see here, I personally like how this looks. I could have made some of things a little bit darker. I could have made the entourage a little bit darker, but that's because I'm zoomed out like 29%, right? And I don't want things to feel heavy. So if I zoom in here, right, once I zoom in, then things feel a little bit more balanced, right? So you see all of the line weights are reading, all of the hierarchies are there. You can clearly tell what's cut, what's surface, what's entourage, what's vegetation, right? So everything is reading, everything is balanced, and that's what you want. You don't want things to be too distracting, right? So you want to clearly tell what's cut and what's not cut. And also, if you just look at the layout itself, like how I have things spaced off, so like I'm giving relief for the text on the left and the right, same thing with the annotations. You see, there's nothing like crammed. Everything has space. Dimensions are pulled off completely. Some people don't like to do this. Some people like to have the elevation markers touch the actual elements it's referring to. I just like to give some space, okay? But in general, this is from this is the one that's like straight out from Illustrator, the Illustrator method, where we took it from Rhino to Illustrator, did all the line weights and everything like that. So this is one of the sections. I'm going to toggle through multiple, but I can zoom in, quite a bit, and the quality is still there. You see? And I like to give white space. So again, so I laid this out in InDesign, right? So I just gave a very nice margin on InDesign, have some final text here. Go to the next one. This is another section. This is like a long section. I think on this one, I could have made the hatching a little bit lighter. It's a little too busy here in my opinion, but I could have made it a little bit lighter, a little bit more gray. And there's a lot of depth that's being read here. I want to show the types of depth that we're reading here, right? So one type of depth that we're seeing here is like, for example, the penetration of the fireplace going through the roof, right?
the vegetation. Like you see how I have the tree here, the tree is continuing beyond, and you can see it in the wind in the background. And then obviously with the entourage, right? You see this, you're seeing the entourage here with the plant and vegetation as well. I could have added shadows on here, but I'm going to do that in a separate video. I want to show you how you can grab, because the video gets too long. But other than that, again, line weights are, everything is balanced, right? So you want to have the same reading everywhere. And again, like once you do this in Illustrator, you will apply the same line weights for everything. And the same thing in Rhino, whether it's the Rhino method or Illustrator method. But another thing just to reinforce is how these sections just look so lively, right? With once you have entourage in here, once you fill this in with entourage and people and hatches, you know, it really changes the feel of the section completely. I could have hatched this door right here, for example. I should have hatched this door as well. That's okay. Maybe the hatch in here could be a little bit lighter. I didn't want to hatch the structure because then it gets too much. I want the structure to read as its own element as part of like the technical aspect of the section. But again, see, I think adding things like books, right, vases, even the background of the bed behind this shelving, the person sitting down reading, I think these things matter. These things help read the section. This is like looking at millwork, right? See, adding small things like this matter, you know? It's a big deal. It really helps, gives a sense of depth. I could have added a hatch in the background as well, but I wanted there to be some contrast. Even the door handles. Again, don't forget, like this is 300 DPI. Like this is around like 100%. This is 100% when you see the section 100%. Giving tolerances is also very important. Okay, so this is like when you do a close-up detail. Remember earlier in the video where I showed you how to scale up your section, right? I scaled up by like 300%. So this is like a nice layout where you show like the typical, this can be like a wall section where this might be maybe like a 1-inch scale instead of a 1/2-inch scale. And then you show the exact same thing here. Some people, they like to add cutout markers or reference markers. So like, for example, you would see like something like this, right? Like you would see a call out here and a call out there and a call out here, here, and here, right? You'd see that. But because this is so self-explanatory, like you literally know what you're looking at when you're referencing it to the side, like I don't think it's necessary. I don't even need to call anything out in terms of the annotations because it's so zoomed in, like it's so close up that I don't need to call anything out, right? You clearly know what the floor assembly is, what the wall assembly is, what the window assembly is going to look like, what the roof assembly is going to look like, okay? But again, see, this is when I scaled it up 1 inch. So this is like a 3-inch scale section. You see, so we're getting very close into the details here. Where in reality, a 3-inch, like it would read like this on your screen. This is how it would read on your screen in terms of like actual scale on a screen. But because this is like a 300 DPI on a screen, it's going to be really zoomed out. But like at a 3-inch scale, like you should be reading it like this big on a screen. You know, I should have pulled these out a little bit more, the lines here. I'm going to go back to this in the video, talk about the technical aspect real fast, you know, what's going on like technically, if people are curious, but I'm just going to keep moving forward with the color version. But I really like wall details like this because it really gives you the narrative of everything, both as a spatial experience and as like a technical experience. And it's just very easy to tell what's going on as an entire assembly system when you have wall section details like this. And then I use this space. This is just makeup space here. I could have made this like a close-up elevation detail if I wanted to, but I use this as like white space to put in the labeling. I should have way more labeling this, but you just get the idea. But I think this is like a nice layout where you have this element and this is extracted from this. Okay, now these are the colored sections that you saw. And so this is the blue. It's just loading. I think that's it looks foggy. Here we go. So this is the blue. So these look super exciting in my opinion. I really like the blue sections very much. I think the blue sections look super fun and they make you, I guess, like a little bit more curious about the space and it makes you want to just look at every single detail from left to right, top and bottom. You want to look at everything was in the blue section. But so this is straight out of Photoshop, right? So we take the Illustrator file and we put it in Photoshop, right? And again, we change the coloring with the selective color, and then I save it as a PNG. I do save for web as a PNG, right? And it's like at maximum quality. It reads well, it reads great, I would say. At this level, I think it's beautiful. I really love the blue. I'll show you the red version, but I want to go through the blue versions first. But they're really exciting when you see the blue version sections. I think they're so fun. Again, this is the blue. Very different feel. Even the vegetation reads better. It just takes like 3 seconds for these to load because the files are not that small. But even the vegetation reads nice on the blue for some reason. Again, like I said, establishing like a sense of depth, right? So like you see this tree here, and you see the remaining of that tree in the background over here is nice. Sometimes doing a different color, it just reads better. Instead of just like a black and a gray, like sometimes the blues or the reds they just read nicer. Again, give it like 3 seconds to load. Looks, there you go. Let me know in the comments if you like the colored version or if you like the black version. I need to fix some you see there's this mistake right here. There's like a little line, I gotta get rid of that. But I mean, it's not the end of the world. Like, you know, if you're a student, like don't worry about small things like this. If you're like doing like a studio project, like this looks way resolved that no one's gonna care. No one's gonna care about these little things here. So don't get too big. In a professional setting, you know, you should be a little bit more precise than this if you catch mistakes like this. Let me zoom in just so that, you know, I'm not hiding anything here. Right? You can see everything. Again, you can read the cuts. It's very easy to tell what's being cut, what's surface. I would say though that sometimes the blue can make some of the hatches a little bit darker. Like this looks a little bit too dark in my opinion, but it's not bad. It's just, it makes it a little bit too dark in my opinion. Again, this is the blue. Like now this is the blue detail version, right? Really fun. I think this is super fun. And again, I should have made this font blue here. This should be blue for sure. This, you're going to view this at 3 inches, right? So at a 3-inch scale, this is like the scale you should be seeing it at, like this zoomed in. This is how it should feel on your screen. And again, I'm going to go back to the black and white detail and tell you what's going on technically, like as an assembly system. All right, this is the red version, and this is the last one. Let it load. I'm not sure about you, but I feel like the blue and the red have a different feel. This is like red-orange, I would say. The red is pretty striking. It's kind of striking. It kind of like hits you a little bit. I like the blue more. If I was going to do a color version of this, it would definitely be the blue. The red just looks cool. It's again, it's very thought-provoking. It kind of catches your, but it's kind of overbearing a bit. It's kind of a little, it's like, it almost gives me a little bit too much tension, like visual tension, you know? It doesn't give me relief visually, but it's cool to look at. It's just for, you know, to give people some inspiration, whether they like it or not. Yeah, I actually prefer the blue, but I just did the red anyway. I feel like things that have more of a bluish hue to it, so like greens, I think greens look cool, or like teals and blues look great. Maybe a magenta would have been a little bit better, like a magenta purplish tone, but the red is a little strong. But I mean, let me know what you think. Maybe you like the red. All right, I'm gonna go back to the detail. I'm gonna go back to the one that's the black and white though. Okay, great. So I just want to go over like the technical aspects of what's going on here. I actually covered it in the previous video in more detail about this wall assembly system, but again, I just want to cover this, right? What's going on? Like you basically have your finished facade here, and then you have your horizontal battens, and this is like an airspace basically, and then these are your vertical battens right here. And then you have your rigid insulation and your membrane, and then your sheathing, and then cavity insulation, and then interior finish. And so typically what happens is they would nail this vertical batten first into the insulation. Sometimes they'll nail it in with the horizontals as well, or they'll just nail the facade with the horizontals in there. So it's a means of methods thing, right? When it comes to the actual foundation, right? This is like a turn down slab. Some people they like to put gravel here, right? Some people don't. Okay, it depends on how deep your footing is and the hydrostatic pressure and how moist the soil is. Some people put like a small French drain and some gravel around here. Others don't. But basically, this is a drainage board right here. And then this is also just perimeter insulation with the membrane in the back as well over here. And then this is the flashing right here. So some people they would call this like a mud sill. This is like a mud sill. And they would have like an insect screen right here. So this right here is like an insect screen that would cover this entire cavity right here. But it would still be able to circulate air in there. And then this is just your reinforcing bars, right? This is these like they call them stirrups, right? So these are the rebars, these are the stirrups. This is like you are gonna have top and bottom reinforcement. Okay, and then this is just the window, right? Remember how I made this light? This is the window. This is just basically blocking. You're always gonna carry the membrane all the way into here. You're gonna carry the membrane all the way into here. Some actually go all the way in. And then this is like your sealant and backer rod for your frame window. And then some people like to do like a wood frame over here. Other people like to do brake metal. It's a matter of preference. And then you have like I can't do this. So there'll be a nailing flange here. This would be a nailing flange that would nail into there. Same thing for the header. And then anywhere that there's an opening, you're always gonna have an insect screen. Even though this is covered, you still want an insect screen. So this is an insect screen here as well. Now, if you go up to the gutter, okay, so this is like a concealed gutter system. I actually am not a fan of concealed gutters. They look really cool. They're very sleek, but they're just so troublesome. In reality, I would have carried this all the way out. Let me just sketch this. I would have carried this if I was going to do it, I would have carried this all the way out. And I would have just done either a very long overhang with a drip edge or, like a round gutter. Concealed gutters just look really clean. They look really, really nice, especially for like a rain screen roof system. They look super cool. But you would have your concealed gutter, and you actually would need an airspace and a gap to circulate air. This is actually like, they would call this a warm roof or like a hybrid warm cold roof. I'll explain this a little bit more later. But and one thing that I could have shown here in my detail is I could have shown like the downspout system, the filter of the downspout right here. You'd have like a filter for the downspout with the actual, like you need some type of drain, right? Unless you want to extend the gutter all the way out well beyond this and it shoots out from sides. But I should have shown maybe like a dash line of like a filter in the gutter for the downspout that goes down in there. And I'll explain the assembly of what's going on here, but I'll do it at the roof. So this is actually for just follow this dotted line because this is important when I explain the roof assembly. So for the roof assembly, right, like what you have here is the exact same as the wall assembly where you have your sheet, you're gonna have your structure. Now, okay, this is actually important. Some people want to insulate the roof as well with cavities. Some people don't. They want to expose the roof structure. So if they have like really nice structural elements for the roof, right, they want to expose the roof structure. Other people, they don't. They want to mitigate as much sound as possible. The other reason why some people want to insulate this is that it limits the temperature differential from outside and inside if you insulate the roof as well. So like maybe they'll insulate like half of it. So like part of the structure is poking out, right? And like this is insulated as well. So they do that so that the temperature from the outside, when it hits here, it doesn't condense as much. Other people are like, no, if you provide ample insulation on the exterior, you don't need to insulate this. They'll just say, yeah, it might condense, the rate of condensation might be a little bit more, but if you can provide ample insulation, you're going to be okay. So there are different opinions about this. I personally like to expose the roof structure. I think it looks beautiful. And I just really like this type of roofing system when it comes to actual construction longevity and things like that. But in general, yeah, you're going to have your sheathing over your structure and then your weather membrane and then your exterior rigid insulation. And then you're going to have battens This is also going to act like as like a rain screen. So you're going to have these long battens that go all the way down. And then you're going to have a secondary sheathing element with like ice and water shield and your weather barrier as well. Not weather barrier, excuse me. They would call it like a drainage mat, or some people would call it a water membrane. People call it different things, but you would need another membrane on top of here, not just here. And then you would have your finished facade over that. And so this dashed line that you see here is actually like an airspace that's provided by the battens, right? So you would need to circulate air through here, because if you don't, it's going to get very warm and it's going to possibly melt the snow. And then if that melts the snow, you know, you're going to get ice that builds up in the gutter, ice that builds up onto the actual roof itself. It can cause water leakage, it can cause water dams, and then you're going to slowly get damage, like water damage over time. So what people typically do is they'll circulate air through here, and then you'll have this perforated ridge vent that will come out, and the air will actually come through there. So it's always circulating, so it always keeps it cold. So in reality, like if it was the winter time, you would see a lot of snow packed up on here. Actually, there would be snow that's just packed up on here because you want to keep it cold. If not, this is just going to have so much water on here, and then when nighttime hits, it's going to freeze, and it's going to freeze in here as well. It's going to build up in here, and when it freezes, it'll expand, and that's how you get a lot of water damage in a lot of places. Yeah, but that's the actual detail assembly. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments about the blue versus the black and white versus the or red. Yeah, so this was a pretty long video. I'm gonna make another video about lighting. So I made a video about plans and plan details, and now this is sections and section details. So now I'm gonna show you like what happens when you start adding shadows and lighting. To be honest, in my opinion, when your sections start to get very detailed with entourage and lots of layering, I don't like to add too many shadows, because then it becomes even more information, which some people say that's a good thing, but it might become too much information. I will say though that having shadows when architecturally there's a lot of depth, that's very helpful because it really helps read. But if your design is very simple like this design is super simple. There isn't a lot of like depth. This design really isn't about depth, right? It's more about surface and more about assembly. It's not about like a push and pull of architectural elements. But if your design did have a lot of like push and pull of architectural elements, of spaces, I think it's very beneficial for you to have a lot of play of shadow. And so yeah, I'll make a video about that, about bringing in shadows from Rhino and how you can overlay it in Illustrator and things like that in a very elegant way. But yeah, that's about it. Again, yeah, this video's been pretty long. I don't like to make videos that long, but I hope this video was helpful. If you have any comments or questions, just leave it in the comment section below. And again, please share this channel with your colleagues or your friends or coworkers, because I really want to help this channel grow. All right, thank you.